Have you ever had the feeling that your life was somehow planned, that certain people or events were meant to be, not by chance, but by design, maybe even by your own choice before you were born? It sounds crazy, right? But what if I told you that there's a book, a forbidden one, that reveals exactly what happened before birth? Not a theory, not a fantasy, but a detailed account that has been whispered about in ancient circles, hidden away from mainstream knowledge and dismissed by modern science. This book speaks of a time before time, of a space before space, where souls gather, where choices are made, where we decide who we're going to be, what challenges we'll face, and even who we'll love, who we'll hurt, and who we'll lose. It tells of a realm where life paths are created like blueprints, and every twist and turn we face might have been chosen for a reason. Most people live their whole lives thinking birth is the beginning, but what if it's actually a continuation of something far deeper? What if we came here not randomly, but with purpose, intention, and clarity? In this video, we're going to explore the pages of this so-called forbidden book and break down what it really says, not the sugar-coated stuff, not the spiritual fluff, but the raw, direct, no BS truths that many don't want to talk about. We'll question everything we've been told, and by the end, you might start to see your own life in a completely new way. So, take a deep breath, and let's begin this journey back to the place before birth, where everything may have already started, long before you opened your eyes to this world. So what exactly is this so-called forbidden book, and why has it been kept in the shadows for so long? The book in question isn't always a single title. Depending on who you ask, it could be linked to ancient texts like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or the mysterious Akashic records, or even certain chapters of Gnostic scriptures that were buried for centuries and only recently rediscovered. But what all of these sources have in common is one thing. They talk openly about what happens before we are born. Now, here's where things get interesting. These books were never part of the mainstream. They were considered too dangerous, too controversial, too spiritually explosive for common knowledge. In some cases they were burned, banned, or hidden by religious authorities who feared they would undermine official teachings. In other cases they were dismissed by scientists and skeptics who labeled them as nonsense or superstition. But those who dared to read them found something they couldn't forget. Inside were detailed descriptions of a realm beyond time, a place where souls exist before entering the human body. The Akashic records, for example, are described as a kind of universal library, a space that holds every thought, every action, and every plan a soul has ever made. And according to these teachings, before we are born, we go there. We review our past lives, we consult with guides or elders, and we choose our next journey. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, although more focused on the afterlife, also contains clues about the transition between death and rebirth. It describes consciousness passing through different stages, and at some point, the soul is drawn toward a new life, often based on karmic energy and unresolved lessons. These teachings were kept within monasteries, passed down through oral tradition, and treated as sacred and secret. Even in early Christian Gnostic texts, there are hints of pre-birth awareness. Some fragments speak of a divine spark within us, a piece of a greater source that willingly enters the world of suffering to grow and learn. But over time, these ideas were erased, edited out of official scripture, replaced with the idea that life begins at birth and ends at death. But why? Why would this knowledge be hidden? Maybe because if people knew they chose their life, their parents, their hardships, even their wounds, they'd start to question the systems around them. They'd look inward instead of outward for meaning. And they'd begin to understand that they are far more powerful than they've been led to believe. So when we talk about the forbidden book, we're not just talking about pages with ink. We're talking about a body of knowledge, passed down in fragments, protected in shadows, and waiting for those who are ready to remember. Because once you start to read between the lines, you'll realize that this information has never been completely lost. It's always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment you begin to ask, who was I before I was me, and why did I choose this life? Now, let's dive into the core concept that this forbidden knowledge presents, the idea that before we are born, we exist somewhere else, in a realm beyond physical space and time, and in that space, we are not human, we are not bodies, we are something else entirely. Something more like energy or consciousness, or what many refer to as the soul. According to these ancient teachings, before birth, we go through a kind of preparation phase. Some describe it like a cosmic classroom. Others describe it as a council or a meeting with guides or elders, wise beings who help us understand what lessons we still need to learn, and what kind of life will best support that growth in this realm. We have a much clearer perspective. We're not clouded by ego or fear. We remember who we really are, and why we keep coming back to this world over and over again. One of the most fascinating ideas is that we actually choose our parents. We choose the environment we will be born into. Whether it's a loving home or a difficult one, we choose our physical bodies, including imperfections, illnesses, and even disabilities, not as punishments, but as tools for experience, for learning, and for transformation. Imagine that for a moment, choosing to be born into a life of struggle, not because you deserve pie, but because the soul knows that within that pain lies something sacred. This is where the concept of soul contracts comes in. It's said that before birth, we make agreements with other souls. Some agree to play the role of our greatest supporters, while others take on the roles of our challengers, the ones who hurt us, betray us, or break our hearts. But even those painful encounters are part of the plan, part of the growth process. From the soul's perspective, there is no good or bad. Only experience, only lessons. These contracts aren't about fate controlling your every move. They're more like a blueprint, a map with certain key events and turning points, but we still have free will. How we respond, how we evolve, how we rise or fall, that's entirely up to us. And that's the beauty of it. Life is a co-creation between our higher self and our human self. The idea of Earth as a kind of spiritual school shows up again and again in these teachings. Earth is seen as one of the most intense, most emotionally rich, and most challenging places a soul can go. It's not for the weak or the unready. It's for those who are serious about growth, about becoming wiser, more loving, more conscious. The fact that you're here, living this human experience, means that your soul chose to step into the fire, to feel deeply, to forget everything, and then slowly remember it again through experience. Some say that before birth, we're even shown glimpses of the life ahead, the major moments, the joys and the heartbreaks, and we still say yes, not out of ignorance, but out of courage, because from that higher perspective, every challenge is an opportunity to awaken. Every loss is a lesson in letting go, and every mistake is a doorway to wisdom. The pre-birth experience described in these forbidden teachings is not about control. It's about empowerment. It's about realizing that nothing is truly random, that life has layers we don't fully see while we're in it, but they're there, guiding us, supporting us, and sometimes even waiting for us to remember where we came from and why we chose to be here. So the next time you ask yourself why something happened to you, or why your life turned out a certain way, maybe the better question is, why did I choose this? What was I trying to learn? And how can I grow from it now that I'm starting to remember the truth? So maybe you're wondering, is there any real evidence to support all of this? Is it just spiritual talk or imagination? Or are there actual stories, testimonies, and patterns that back up the idea of a pre-birth experience? And surprisingly, there are more than you might expect. Let's start with children across different cultures and time periods. There have been thousands of documented cases where young children remember things they shouldn't, not just past lives, but the time before they were born. Some children speak of watching their parents from above before choosing them. Others talk about being in a bright place full of light, surrounded by beings who help them get ready for life on Earth. One well-known example is from a boy who told his mother, "I saw you and Daddy before I came here. I picked you because I knew you would help me learn about kindness." Now, a child that young doesn't have the language or life experience to make something like that up in such detail. And when these stories are compared from country to country, even among kids who have never met, the similarities are hard to ignore. Then there's the fascinating work of people like Dr. Michael Newton, a hypnotherapist who didn't start out looking for spiritual answers. He was helping patients with ordinary issues, but during deep regression sessions, many of his clients began describing the same thing, a place between lives, where they remembered choosing their next incarnation, meeting soul groups, reviewing past actions, and planning their next journey. And these weren't just vague memories. They were filled with detail, emotion, and consistency across hundreds of sessions. He wrote about it in books like Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. And what's so compelling is that people from completely different backgrounds, ages, beliefs, and even languages described nearly identical experiences when under deep hypnosis. They talked about meeting spirit guides, entering a peaceful realm filled with light and love, and feeling a deep sense of purpose before choosing to be born. You'll also find similar accounts in near-death experiences. Many people who have temporarily crossed the boundary of death describe seeing a place of clarity, of peace, and being told it's not their time yet. But some also mention remembering why they came here in the first place. They often return with a deeper understanding that their life has meaning, even if they don't remember all the details consciously. In ancient spiritual traditions, especially those from India, Egypt, and Tibet, you find echoes of the same idea, that the soul journeys through various stages and makes conscious decisions about its next incarnation. In Hindu teachings, for example, the soul is said to be eternal, traveling through cycles of birth and rebirth, driven by karma, but also guided by higher wisdom. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead describes a series of realms the soul passes through after death, and before entering a new life, sometimes choosing based on emotional attachments, lessons, or unresolved desires. Even in modern Western psychology, some thinkers like Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a vast ocean of shared human memory and wisdom. And while not identical to pre-birth awareness, it points to the idea that we carry more knowledge within us than we realize. All of this doesn't prove anything in the way that science usually demands, but when so many people, from different places and walks of life, describe similar experiences with no connection to each other, it raises a powerful question. Are they all imagining the same thing? Or are they remembering something real, something deeply buried in the human experience? So the next time you hear a child say something that feels strangely wise, or read about someone who remembers choosing their life before it began, don't be so quick to dismiss it. These stories might just be fragments of a bigger truth, a truth that's been hidden. Not because it's false, but because it's powerful, and because it invites us to see life not as something that happens to us, but as something we helped create before we even arrived. Now, the question becomes, if all of this is true, or even partly true, why don't we hear about it more often? Why isn't it taught in schools? Why is it not part of mainstream culture? And why do so many people reject it without even looking into it? The answer isn't simple, but it is powerful. First, you have to understand how most of society is built. From the time we are born, we're trained to focus on what we can see, what we can touch, what we can measure. The world teaches us to believe only in what's physical, in what's logical, in what can be proven with numbers and facts. Anything outside of that is often labeled as fantasy, superstition, or nonsense. But this wasn't always the case. In ancient times, wisdom about the soul, the spirit, and the journey before and afterlife was considered sacred knowledge. It was taught by the priests, the sages, the monks, and the philosophers. But over time, especially with the rise of materialism and organized systems of power, that knowledge became dangerous, not because it was false, but because it gave people a sense of freedom and responsibility that made them harder to control. If you believe you are just a random body living one random life, then you are easier to manipulate. You chase pleasure, avoid pain, follow rules without question, and fear death more than anything. But if you believe that your soul chose this life, that you are part of something greater, and that nothing truly dies, then you become powerful. You become harder to scare, harder to deceive, and harder to control. This is why some ancient texts were hidden, or destroyed, or only taught in secret. The idea of pre-birth knowledge challenges everything. It challenges the fear-based systems that many religions and governments rely on. It challenges the idea that you are broken and need saving. It says you came here by choice, and that you already carry the wisdom within you. Even in modern times, people who speak about pre-birth memories, soul contracts, or higher realms are often ridiculed, labeled as crazy, or accused of making it up, not because there's no truth in what they're saying, but because the system isn't built to hold that kind of truth. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't fit the narrative of competition, survival, and blind obedience. There's also a fear of personal responsibility, because if you truly accept that your soul had a hand in choosing your life, your pain, your family, your body, then you can't fully blame the world anymore. You have to look within. You have to ask what you're supposed to learn from all of it. And that's hard. It takes courage. And not everyone is ready for that kind of inner power. But maybe that's exactly why it's been hidden. Because if enough people started remembering who they really are and why they're here, the entire way we live would change. Education would shift. Priorities would change. People would stop chasing status and start chasing purpose. They would live with more love, more intention, more awareness. And that kind of shift would break systems that thrive on fear and divisio. It's not that the truth is being kept from us by some secret group in a dark room. It's more subtle than that. It's kept from us through distraction, through noise, through a world that's constantly telling us to look outside instead of inside, to seek answers in screens, in status, in stuff, instead of in silence, reflection, and deep inner knowing. But once the door is opened, even just a little, it's hard to close it, a guy. Once you start to question the story you've been told about who you are and where you come from, something begins to awaken. And even if the world keeps trying to put you back to sleep, that spark inside you starts to grow. So maybe this knowledge was hidden for a reason. Maybe it was protected until the time was right. Maybe the time is now. And maybe the fact that you're hearing this means you're ready to remember what you've always known deep down, that you are not just a body, not just a name, not just a life. You are a soul on a journey. And the story didn't begin with your birth. It began long before that. Now, let's bring this all back to you, because the real impact of understanding this pre-birth knowledge isn't just about feeling enlightened or tapping into some spiritual truth. It's about how it changes your life, how it shifts the way you approach each day, each relationship, and each challenge you face. Because when you start to understand that your soul chose this life, that you are not just a victim of circumstances, but an active participant in this journey, everything begins to change. First, think about how you view your struggles, your challenges, your difficulties. When you realize that you're not just going through random suffering, but that these experiences may have been chosen to help you learn, grow, and evolve, that gives them a new level of meaning. You stop feeling like life is happening to you, and start feeling like life is happening for you. Everything shifts from victimhood to empowerment. It's not that the challenges go away, but they start to feel like opportunities to grow, to rise, and to align with the deeper purpose of your existence. Now, imagine how this shifts your relationships. if you truly understand that you chose your family, your friends, your partners, not as accidents or mistakes, but as part of your soul's plan for growth, you stop blaming people for your unhappiness. You stop expecting others to fulfill you or complete you. Instead, you start to see everyone as part of your soul's journey. People who are here to help you learn something, to mirror aspects of yourself, to push you into your next phase of evolution. And when you start to view your relationships through this lens, they begin to take on a whole new meaning. Let's talk about your purpose, because when you begin to grasp that you're here for a reason, not just to work, consume, or survive, but to fulfill a deeper purpose that you chose before you were born. That is the most empowering thing you could ever realize, because it means that every moment of your life, every decision, every action carries meaning. It means that you don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to look outside for validation. You already have within you the answers, the wisdom, and the guidance that you need to live a life of meaning and fulfillment. Think about how you view death. Now that you know that life is not just a random event, but part of an ongoing cycle, you realize that death is not the end. It's just another phase, another transition. And with that knowledge comes a sense of peace, a sense of release. You stop fearing death, and instead, you start to live more fully, knowing that this life is one chapter in an ongoing story of your soul's evolution. Now, this doesn't mean that life becomes perfect or that everything always makes sense. Far from it. There will still be hardships. There will still be confusion. There will still be moments when you wonder what the heck is going on. But knowing that there is a deeper purpose, that your soul is always guiding you, that the challenges you face are part of your growth, that gives you the strength to keep moving forward, to keep showing up, even when it feels hard. Because you know that all of this is part of a much bigger story, and in the end, you will look back and see the threads connecting everything. When you start to understand your pre-birth knowledge, your soul's plan, and the purpose behind your life, you no longer feel lost. You no longer feel as though you are just wandering through life hoping to find meaning. You already have it. It's inside you. It's always been inside you. And when you tap into that deeper awareness, you can move through life with confidence, with clarity, and with peace, because you know that you're on the path you are always meant to walk. So ask yourself, what would happen if you started to view your life through this lens? What would change if you remembered, deep down, that you chose all of this, that you came here with purpose, with intention, with a plan? How would you live differently? How would you act differently? How would you approach your challenges differently? And that, my friend, is the personal impact of embracing this knowledge, because once you truly understand it, once you really feel it in your bones, everything shifts. You move from simply existing to truly living, and that is the greatest gift you can give yourself. As we wrap up today's discussion, it's important to remember that the ideas we've talked about aren't just abstract concepts. They're life-changing truths that have the potential to transform the way you see yourself and your life. This knowledge isn't something that's meant to be accepted without question. It's meant to be felt, experienced, and integrated into your daily life, because when you start to realize the power of pre-birth awareness, when you start to see your life as part of a bigger journey, something within you shifts. You begin to see your struggles differently. They're not just random events. They are opportunities for growth, for learning, for evolving into the person you are always meant to be. And that shift, that change in perspective, is what makes all the difference. Because once you know that you are part of something much bigger, you can move through life with a deeper sense of purpose, with more confidence, and with more peace. It's also important to understand that this knowledge isn't for everyone. Not everyone is ready to hear it. Not everyone is prepared to face the reality of what it means to be a soul on a journey. But for those of you who are, for those of you who feel the pull, who feel the deep knowing in your heart, this is a reminder that you are not alone. that you are not just a random person in a chaotic world. You are a soul with a purpose, with a plan, and with the power to create the life you desire. So, as you move forward, take this knowledge with you. Let it guide you in your decisions, in your relationships, in the way you approach life's challenges. And remember that you are not just a product of your circumstances. You are a soul with infinite potential. And that potential is waiting to be unlocked. It's waiting for you to take the next step in your journey. And finally, never forget that the answers you seek are not outside of you. They're inside of you. You don't need to search the world for validation, or approval, or a sense of purpose. You already have everything you need within. You simply need to listen, to trust, and to remember. So as we end today's video, I encourage you to reflect on what we've discussed. Think about how these ideas can shift your perspective, and ask yourself, what would change if you remembered who you truly are? What would change if you embraced the power of your soul's journey? The choice is yours, and the time is now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.